It's ongoing to examine everything about our system from the trusted supply chain to the field and operational capability. I cannot underscore the importance of this more. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I look forward to the committee's questions.
Thank you. General Mann, thank you.
Good afternoon.
I understand you'll be leaving us before long, too. This may be your last day here, so thank you so much for your work. And would please me if Alabama
Yes, sir.
came home.
Yes, sir.
Good.
I'll vote for Indiana.
Well, good afternoon, Chairman Sessions, Ranking Member Donnelly, and the other members of the subcommittee. Thank you for your continued support of our soldiers, our civilians, and our families. This is, again, my third appearance before this subcommittee, and it is indeed an honor to testify before you today to discuss the importance of missile defense to our nation and the need to maintain these capabilities in face of a threat that continues to grow both in complexity and unpredictability. Today, I wanted to briefly discuss global missile defense operations and how Space and Missile Defense Command, Army Forces Strategic Command, executes its role as a force provider in support of our nation and our combatant commands. We have three core tasks. Number one, to provide trained and ready global missile defense forces today. Secondly, to build future missile defense forces and capabilities for tomorrow. And third, to evaluate emerging technologies to address future requirements. Today, we have approximately 300 full-time National Guard soldiers located at Fort Greely, Alaska, and at Vandenberg Air Force Base who operate our ground-based mid-course defense system. And as you know, this is the nation's only defense against a limited intercontinental ballistic missile attack. These trained and ready soldiers fully understand the importance of the mission that they execute. And in fact, they like to refer to themselves as the 300, protecting the 300 million plus. I also represent the Joint Functional Component Command for Integrated Missile Defense in support of U.S. Strategic Command. Specifically, this component command synchronizes operational level planning, supports ongoing operation, integrates training exercises and testing globally. It also provides recommendations on the allocation of our limited missile defense assets in support of our combatant commands. And finally, it evaluates future missile defense requirements. This committee's continued support of missile defense and of our soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen, and civilians who develop, deploy, and operate our systems is essential. Again, I appreciate the opportunity to speak on the value of integrated missile defense for our nation, and I look forward to addressing any questions that you may have. Thank you.
I believe in order here, let's see, I think Senator Donnelly was first on this side because he's ranking, he would be next. And Senator Inhofe and Fisher, Lee were, I think, here at the beginning of the hearing, and Senator Sullivan.
They're actually ahead of me. That's all right.
Were you here before we started, or were you not?
Okay, sure.
Yeah, but I did, Senator Lee has a conflict, so I'm going to yield my time to him, and we'll otherwise be on the same path unless there's some suggestion of a change. I know he's got something he's got to go to. Thank you for being with us, Senator Lee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to all of you for being here. We're honored by your presence and grateful for all you do for us to keep us safe. As we look across the array of threats that we face around the world, there are two threats that stand out and that cause a lot of us to worry. One is ballistic missile attacks, and the other one is cybersecurity-related threats. So I'm glad all of you are here because you do a lot of work in this area, and I'm grateful for that. Secretary McKeon and Admiral Gortney, I'd like to ask the two of you some questions about the cost-benefit analysis that we have in this area. The United States has spent many tens of billions of dollars over the last 3 decades on missile defenses. It's a large sum. It's a sum that's drawn some criticism, and it's a sum that, regardless of how you feel about that criticism, is one that we have to pay attention to. But in much the same way that other technologies, like, for example, drone technology, cost us a lot of money to develop at the outset, but in the end has saved us and has even more potential to save us down the road a lot of money, because compared to other aircraft systems, manned aircraft systems, for example, in the long run we can actually save money. In the same respect, how and in what respect, to what extent, could having reliable a reliable missile defense system, help us save money for the military and for the government over the long haul.
I guess when you look at the ballistic missile threat, there's actually two types of ballistic missile threats, and it's the theater ballistic missile threat that we have service members and service members' families that live underneath that threat today, and then we have the ballistic missile threat, limited ballistic missile threat that we've designed for the homeland. I think what's important where MDA is moving on the technologies is where is there efficiencies to get us on the correct side of the cost curve, not just engage in mid-course for both those threats, but keeping them on the ground, left of launch, having the surveillance to be able to strike them, provided we have the rules of engagement to do that, killing them in boost phase, and then through the mid-course phase. And a lot of those technologies that you all have provided the funding for the research and development, MDA is using that will be able, a lot of it will be able to apply to both those particular threats. And I think that's where where we have to really view that's where the savings will be, because they're different. They differentiate by range of a threat, but the technologies to counter them can be the same where the necessary technologies can be.
Thank you. Secretary?
The only thing I'd add, Senator, I think the way we would think about missile defense in a very broad sense, both regionally and our homeland missile defense, is it's a deterrent against rogue states or nations engaged in activity that we disagree with. And so in addition to our own missile defenses, we're encouraging a lot of partners in the Middle East and in Asia and to acquire missile defenses in the theater. So for example, in Iran, we're working to counter Iran and its missile capabilities. We're working very closely with our partners in the Gulf to encourage their acquisition of missile defense systems, as well as knitting them together in terms of the early warning. And so that is a deterrent that over the long term will save, we believe, money in other respects.
Thank you. Admiral Courtney, let's talk about North Korea for a minute. I'd love to get your assessment of where North Korea's ballistic missile technology is headed in the next few years, and then evaluate our ability to keep up with it and respond to that.
Okay, well, the intel community assesses North Korea's ability to successfully shoot an ICBM with a nuclear weapon and range the homeland is low. But as the commander in charge that is responsible for defending that homeland, who owns the trigger to shoot that down, we don't base our readiness levels upon that low probability. We assess, it's the prudent course of action as the commander, we assess that he has the ability to do that, and we're prepared to engage that particular threat today and in the future, 24 hours a day, 365 days out of the year. Eventually, we assess that his low probability will increase, and that's why the investments to have us outpace that technology, his ability to field that capability is absolutely critical.
Thank you, Admiral. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for your service. Admiral Searing, based on the current and anticipated threat to the homeland, how would you prioritize where to locate additional sensor capabilities to enhance the GMD system?
Sir, we have a ongoing AOA in the department that's looking around the world on exactly that. And, you know, we will look at areas like Hawaii, we will look at areas like the East Coast or the Atlantic region as gaps that we see in the future based on where the threat goes with both Iran and North Korea. But I've testified to this committee that censoring is where we need to be, and certainly there are gaps, not in tracking and classification, but where I see the need for discrimination in the future against a much more complex threat that may come.
Thank you. Admiral Gortney, in regards to the prioritization in this area, how do you see the threat picture, and where do you see the necessity for this?
I'm completely in line with my shipmate on the other end of the table. You know, we need to make that which we have the best we can possibly make it. We need improvements in our sensors. We need to continue to test so that we have confidence in our weapon system, that the operators have confidence in their weapon system, and our leadership has confidence in the weapon system. And then we need to make those necessary investments to get us on the correct side of the cost curve so that we get the best value for it, not just a very expensive mid-course solution. So, and that's where MDA is moving, and we appreciate your support on that.
Admiral Gortney, in your view, why is it important that NORTHCOM have the responsibility for providing ballistic missile defense for our country?
Because I'm assigned as the commander to defend the homeland. And with that, that comes with the job.
Okay. Secretary McCune and Admiral Searing, over the past 10 years, we've made significant investments in U.S.-Israeli cooperative missile defense programs, including Iron Dome, David Sling, Arrow. I was in Israel last month to review a number of these, and I was wondering, and we'll start with you, Secretary McCune, how you assess the importance of these programs and what benefits we gain from our cooperation with Israel on these systems.
Senator Donnelly, our cooperation with Israel is part and parcel of a very broad and deep security relationship with the State of Israel, and our administration, like many before it, has stood with Israel in providing the necessary security assistance to protect it so that it can protect itself against in a pretty dangerous neighborhood. With the R&D work that we do together with them, we obviously get some benefit that I think Admiral Searing can speak to in a little bit more detail. But we think it's been essential, our cooperation with them, and we've seen the success of the Iron Dome in some recent conflicts that has protected the Israeli people.
Has been the concept of this effort with the 3 different systems, in effect, layering? So, Admiral, if you would just discuss that for a second.
Senator, thank you. I'll just pile on to what the Secretary said. The importance of those systems to the protection of Israel every day, just with Iron Dome, and then the fielding soon of David Sling, and then Arrow after that, will provide them an umbrella that I think will be unparalleled in the region and absolutely necessary. We've had a close partnership and relation with them on all their programs with missile defense over the last really beyond several years, way back to Arrow 2, in terms of the relationship that we've had with Israel and MDA specifically. I'll just, if I can, just transfer now to the maturity of the programs.
Yeah.
We've worked very closely with them on David Sling in particular. This is the mid-tier level.
Right.
And they were very successful. We were very successful together in testing last year, and we fully support their readiness for production this year. Arrow 3, which is the exosystem, similar to where we are with that and Aegis in the upper tier, successfully intercepted as well last year. So they're progressing at a great pace with high success rates. What benefit do we get as the United States? We get tremendous benefit in terms of the Iron Dome procurement dollars that we and you have appropriated, we have asked for and you have appropriated and then added to even, have resulted in significant work share for U.S. companies. 35% of the procurement in 14, 55% of the procurement dollars in 15 go to U.S. companies. To me, that's of great value to them. We also learn a lot from what they've done in terms of choosing components and the engineering they've done on their interceptors. They've done a fantastic job of achieving good performance.
Are we picking up tips, in effect, of
Yes, sir.
better defense of our country from the challenges they face?
We absolutely are in the regional area and have learned a lot from the performance and the design of their interceptors, which is critically important for why you hear us say we need the technical data package, for example, for David Sling, so we can take that information and use it to our advantage for our systems and our interceptors.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Admiral Searing, I think that's a great answer. I'm glad that there's so many people out there that think that we're just Israel is always the beneficiary of everything that goes on. That's not true at all. We have ourselves been benefited a great deal, along with where would we be in that part of the world if we didn't have Israel? So I'm glad we're talking about that, and I think it's necessary for all of us to do that continuously.
Sure.
When Senator Donnelly asked the question, Admiral Gortney about why Northcom. Now, your answer is accurate. You said we're assigned that and we'll get it done. I think the thrust of his question was there are a lot of options out there to protect the United States. Northcom is one. Is that the best one? And the question, I think, was why Northcom?
Because it's attached to a long-standing NORAD mission, which is ITWA, which is from the Soviet Union days, make a declaration of an attack from the homeland from an ICBM against, in this case, the Soviet threat. And we still make that assessment today and use that architecture to help assess against the rogue nation for the ballistic missile defense of the homeland. So it nests very well with the headquarters for us to make those assessments and to be able to hold the trigger, and we're manned, trained, and equipped to do it. We don't have the personnel, soldiers, guardsmen predominantly, run those particular things, but they answer to me for the shot decision.
Yeah, no, I wasn't saying it critically. I just wanted to hear so I can answer the question when I'm asked.
Yes, sir.
And Admiral Gortney, you wrote in your statement that, quote, our potential adversaries are pursuing advanced weapons development not seen in decades. I agree with that. We can go on and quote James Clapper and Admiral Stewart on their assessments of the threat is greater than any threat that we've faced before. We've had them countless times in our committee hearing. But the last one, when General Stewart ended up assessing the threat that we have, General Stewart called it the new normal. That bothered me when I heard that. I mean, is that kind of, I kind of put the interpretation of that on there that don't expect anything better. What's your interpretation of it being the new normal?
I think we live in the world we live in, not the world we would like to live in. And with return to great power competition as described by the Secretary, the resurgence of Russia, the involvement of China, the capabilities that both are developing. In the case of Russia, advanced, very accurate cruise missiles that can be either conventional or nuclear warheads that they have employed, conventional, from aircraft into Syria, and from ships and submarines, TLAM-like weapons from ships and submarines into Syria, when they had no operational or tactical utility on the battlefield, according to General Austin. And so they were messaging us that they are fielding these capabilities. They're weapons that we have been successfully employing for the last 20, 25 years. They see great value in them. And it changes the dynamics. Russia today, if they chose, and I think very low likelihood, whereas before they developed these weapons for long-range aviation, they had to come into our battle space in order to employ their weapons.
Yeah, so they're catching up, or in some areas even passing us. I don't know, I got the interpretation of that we better get used to it because that's still happening. Now, due to the proliferation of technology and the number of countries possessing the ballistic missile capability, it continues to increase.
That's correct.
And we know that. And yet, while that's increasing, our budget during the last, from 07 to I think, well, here, I've got it down here, has declined 14% between fiscal year 08 and 17. You know, with the threat that's increasing like that, can all of you say that this is adequate? We need to be doing a better job in terms of the budget. That's kind of what we're talking about in this hearing.
Clearly, sir, there's trade-offs between the near-term threat and the long-term threat, current threat, future threat, and that's the choices that we've been forced to make given the size of the budget.
Yeah, we don't need to elaborate on that, but I was going to get into something else, but I want to at least do this. When we were initially starting the first Obama budget in 2009, cut missile defense by $1.4 billion. Now, that was when they actually addressed the Czech Republic and which had the radar and Poland in terms of the equipment. I can remember being with Václav Klaus during that time, and I remember prior to that, it would have been the year before this new administration, they said, you know, we're willing to do all of this, but if we do, we're taking a lot of risk in terms of alienating even further Russia. And he said, can you tell me that you're not going to pull the rug out from under you? And I said, absolutely. And of course, that's what happened. Now we're looking at a new setup. Now, something had to replace the what we had that down for, which was to protect Western Europe and Eastern United States, along with increasing from 30 to 44, I understand, ground-based interceptors. What else is being done, particularly to take the place of what that was designed to protect at the time before it was pulled away?
Senator Inhofe, you are correct that that decision was made in 2009, but the context was that we were seeing that the Iranian ICBM threat had not materialized in the way that people had anticipated, and the near-term threat to Europe and our European partners and our deployed forces was expansion of their medium-range ballistic missile programs. Secretary Gates has spoken to some of this in his book, his own skepticism that the Czechs and the Poles were going to be able to, at least the Czechs, carry it forward in their own government. And we replaced it, as you know, with the European phase adaptive approach with a number of a radar in Turkey, some ships that are home ported in Rota, Spain, and then 2 Aegis Ashore sites, one in Romania and one in Poland. One in Romania, as Admiral Searing said, is essentially technically capable and will be fully operational this year. And the site in Poland we're going to break ground on. So we have kept the commitment that we made to our European partners.
Mr. Secretary, my time has expired some time ago, so I'm not going to ask a question except for the record from the 3 uniforms that are here. Do you feel that we adequately replaced what we were attempting to do before the change was made in Poland and the Czech Republic? For the record, all right? Later, not now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Senator Heinrich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Admiral Searing, to follow up on the question from Senator Donnelly and talk a little bit more about our efforts with our partner in Israel, we've made significant investments to protect our ally Israel from ballistic missile threats in the region. And when you look back at the last decade, I think our contribution has been over $3 billion to those efforts. I was very pleased to see a co-production agreement signed for Iron Dome that's allowing American companies here in the U.S. to help manufacture that very important capability. I was wondering what the status is of the co-production arrangement on Iron Dome and what progress might be being made to potentially co-produce other systems in the future, for example, David Sling.
Sure. The co-production agreement's in place with Iron Dome, and we're achieving the savings that were laid out in that agreement. And I'm confident that any additional dollars like the Iron Dome requests that we have this year in 17 will follow that agreement. David Sling is those negotiations and drafts are ongoing, discussions ongoing with Israel, and our objective is to achieve the similar outcome with Iron Dome production.
Great. Glad to hear that.
I'm sorry, with David Sling production, correction.
I understood what you meant, not what you said. So moving on to another issue that I know that Senator Inhofe cares a lot about, I do as well, directed energy. Last year, we saw the appropriators cut technology maturation funding to MDA, effectively delaying further progress of a laser demonstrator, which would have, finally gotten the work out of the lab and into flight test of that technology. How important is it that that funding be restored in this upcoming year's appropriations?
So the critical issue that I've spoken privately and publicly to members about over the last few months is the support for that demonstration. And the ability for us to get a low-power laser at, we're thinking in the 100 kilowatt range, up at altitude to prove the coherency and the physics part of the problem, as you're well aware, and to see if there's a feasible design, a feasible material solution for a boost phase intercept capability. We're asking for $278 million, if you look at the out-year budget, for that demonstrator between now and 2021. We are not asking for a $5.5 billion airborne laser program. We're asking for a prototype to go prove the feasibility, to give confidence to the warfighter that they believe it's feasible, and to the department that we believe it's fiscally affordable.
Well, I think as we see the ballistic missile threats that we've all heard talked about here today, multiply the number of potential missiles that we could face either in theater or intercontinentally continue to increase, I think it's going to be more and more important that we look at long-term solutions that are actual game changers like directed energy to solve some of those issues.
I agree, sir.
One last question. This can be either for Admiral Gortney or you, Admiral Searing. Two of our foremost military leaders, former Chief of Naval Operations Admiral Greenert, former Army Chief of Staff General Odierno, said in a memo that our missile defense strategy was, quote-unquote, unsustainable, and that ballistic missile threats, quote, continue to outpace our active defense systems, unquote. Do you agree with that assessment? What do you make of it? And what needs to either change or what has changed in our capabilities if you don't agree with that?
Sir, I was in the meeting that generated that particular article, and in that, at the time, I was the force provider for the United States Navy at Fleet Forces Command down in Norfolk. And the fundamental issue is because of our current strategy, we are wearing out our Patriot, soon-to-be THAAD, and our Aegis-capable platforms. Low density, high demand, the threat is increasing, and we're on an unaffordable path. Very expensive rockets to shoot down maybe not so expensive rockets. And so that's why the necessary investments, the airborne laser, the laser being one of those, to get us on the correct side of the cost curve, not just relying on mid-course kinetic engagement. The whole trying to knock down the threats throughout the entire spectrum is absolutely critical.
Okay. That's very helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I could follow up a little on what the senator was just asking about specifically with the R&D. As we look at the R&D budget, it continues to decrease, yet I think all of us realize the need we have for these capabilities in the future. If you're going to look long-term, the next 20 years, we're going to need these capabilities, yet we continue to cut back on that R&D budget. So, Admiral Searing, I'd ask you, how do we get on the right side of this?
Yes, ma'am.
You know, you're saying, well, it's in the budget for this, it's in the budget for that, but looking ahead 20 years, you and I both have to say it's not in the budget. So what do you propose to us? Do we stay headed in this direction? How much do you really need?
It's a great question, and let me, if I can I point back to the chart that the chairman showed on the MDA top line? And
of course.
I came into this job in the FY12, FY13 timeframe. I've been here almost 4 years now. So if I can, just talk about let's lift up just a second, if we can, in terms of what the R&D is being budgeted to and requested for, and what we're not doing. I think that's the point, Mr. Chairman, of what you're after here in this discussion, if I may. So we came in, and everybody knows of the sequestration reduction that happened, and that's annotated on the chart. But what's not shown on the chart in words here is that we made the decision in the 2013 timeframe to pivot back to the GMD program and increase the capacity and capability, really, of that program that had already been fielded several years before. The investment here that you see ramping up over these years, ma'am, is to that point in terms of improving the GMD reliability, getting the radar going in Alaska, improving our discrimination capability, and redesigning the kill vehicle, which we're not satisfied with its reliability today. That is that increase of capability here. There was a big non-recurring investment actually in 2016 to add money into the GMD program that had been cut from before. I think I've talked to you about this in the past in terms of modeling, reliability, stockpile reliability programs, things like that that needed to be done to increase the warfighter's confidence in the system. All of that got going in 2016. We actually, let's go to 2017, we actually requested in 2016, $7.8 billion. And when the budget agreement was signed late last year, the department was shorted, not short, was down $22 billion from the top line. My share of that was $300 million. So that's why you see a request of 7.5. So the last thing, ma'am, if I can just make the point, the last point is, okay, what aren't you doing? I am continuing essentially 4 New Start programs here under this top line, and we'll field them in 2020. Now, does that mean that we're done? Absolutely not. There are gaps in the system still with radar, sensors, directed energy, R&D programs that we're trying to feed at a much lower level of funding to go prove whether they're feasible or not. And I think once we prove that, you will see a ramp up in the request for R&D if we can make the case that it's feasible and affordable. It's a much different way of looking at it is let's go prove it first and prove to the warfighter, prove to the community, prove to the department that it can be done, prove to you that it's feasible before we come forward with a big R&D program. There was not one POM 18 issue that above the line that I'm sorry, POM 17 issue above the line that I submitted to the department, not one. And to me, that's us being good stewards of the taxpayer dollar and being careful on how far we lean into advanced technology if it's truly not ready to go.
And as we look at our adversaries, if we look at China, if we look at Russia and the arsenals that they have, if we look at the developing capabilities of the Iranians and the North Koreans, how are we going to stack up against them when we look out in 20 years?
Want me to take that, or maybe Admiral Gortney from the warfighter standpoint?
That would be good. Admiral Gortney.
Well, we're designed against the rogue nation right now, ma'am. Limited capability against North Korea today, Iran, should Iran have the capability today. That's what we're designed against. And I see the investments designed to outpace that particular threat. It's not targeted at Russia. It's not targeted at China.
Should it be?
I'll defer to the policy on that.
I knew you'd say that. Thank you, sir. I see my time's up. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Good questions. Let's see, it's now Senator Manchin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank all of you for your service, and thank you for being here. To General Mann, I'm a strong supporter of the National Guard and its versatile role in supporting the national homeland security, especially in the area of missile defense. Knowing that one of your major responsibilities is missile defense, what is your assessment of the National Guard's performance in the missile defense operations for the Pacific Theater? How are they performing?
So you're referring to Fort Greely and from Vandenberg, the GBI support that we're providing, or
Correct.
Okay. Quite frankly, I'm extremely pleased. Those soldiers who have been doing that mission for many, many years are extremely competent and confident, and they take this mission very, very seriously. And quite frankly, when we talk about the ground-based mid-course defense program, that's different from THAAD and Patriot. That's a unique system.
Right.
And so they bring to the table a unique skill set that they've been able to develop over time, and they're constantly raising the bar in terms of the level of sophistication, the difficulty of the scenarios that they train against every day. So very, very pleased with what the National Guard is doing that. And I would also like to say that we're very, very pleased with the way the National Guard is supporting a lot of other activities in terms of air and missile defense over in Europe. A lot of different rotations, training rotations that are taking place over there, as well as throughout the Pacific. So very, very pleased with them.
I would follow up by saying, that what is your assessment of the future missile defense needs for the East Coast?
I agree with Admiral Searing very clearly that I think what is really key is that we maintain a level of predictability in terms of our resources. Whether it's this administration or going into the future, I think the level of predictability is extremely important, and making sure that we maximize our current capabilities. So it's more than just how many arrows that we have in our quiver. It really is, at the end of the day, making sure that we maximize current capabilities, increasing the reliability of those current capabilities as we look into the future. So the sensor piece is critically important to making sure that the numbers that we have, 30 going to 44 GBIs, that we maximize that capability to the fullest extent possible, and that's what that sensor will do for us.
And Admiral Gortney, you previously assessed that North Korea has the ability to miniaturize a nuclear weapon and put it on a KN-08 intercontinental ballistic missile and shoot it to homeland. Based on recent reporting, the South Korean government has assessed that North Korea is capable also of mounting a nuclear warhead on a medium-range Rodong ballistic missile, which could reach all South Korea and most of Japan. So do you share the South Korea government's views on North Korea's capabilities?
Yes, sir, I do.
And that's a threat that you said that we're prepared to deal with?
That's correct. Yes, sir, it is. I would also like to reinforce the General's comment about the great work that the Guard are doing in the defense of the mission, and also Guardsmen who are protecting at Fort Greely. It's the Puerto Rican National Guard that has the security force up there.
Are you all constricted at all by using the Guard or asking for that Guard?
No, sir, we've worked through those authorities. It works seamlessly.
That's all, it's seamless now?
Yes, sir.
So, thank you, that's all my questions.
Senator Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and gentlemen, thank you for all the hard work that you're doing for our nation. Admiral Gortney, I just want to follow up and commend you on your the way you're laying out the threat with regard to North Korea. You mentioned low probability with regard to the ability to miniaturize a nuclear weapon and hit the continental United States, but that we should, it's prudent and smart to make sure that as the warfighter, you're ready. Let me ask two questions on that. Is it low probability to be able to range Alaska or Hawaii, or is it a higher probability from the threat assessment? Do you know if there's a difference there?
We don't treat it any differently. They're all states, and I'm accountable to defend them, and we have the ability to defend them.
Great. I'm glad that we don't treat the non-contiguous states different from the lower 48 states. But you mentioned the low probability right now, but in your assessment, that's unlikely to stay low. Isn't that correct? It seems like almost every day we're seeing a new news story about ICBM engines and other things being developed. Isn't it prudent to assume that low probability is going to morph into moderate or maybe even high within the next 5 to 10 years?
Yes, sir, and the reason the intel community assesses the low probability of success is they haven't seen the tests occurring. However, as the Secretary talked about, the TD2 shows that they have the capability. And so you put that capability with a road mobile capability, with the right engines, with designing a reentry vehicle, with the nuclear weapon and the miniaturization, it's only a matter of time before they put it together. That's why we watch their test efforts so closely, because although they haven't done the end-to-end test, which we would do, they may not be compelled to wait for that end-to-end test.
Let me ask, actually, since you brought up the issue of testing, with regard to the GMD, Admiral Searing, General Mann, in your testimony, you actually emphasized the importance of testing our system. How often do we test our system, and what are the benefits, and do we need to budget more resources to testing our system?
So we're on about an annual test cadence, and that can be 10 months, that could be 14 or 15 months, depending on when the range is available and when it fits in. And more importantly, when do we need to test to field the capability? A GMD test is very expensive, very intrusive. We take up the entire Pacific with the targets that we need to launch and the interceptor that's launched from Vandenberg. We are testing at a rate that I think...
Given its importance, though, I think most Americans would recognize that a little bit of inconvenience in that regard is okay.
Sure, and they do, and we're never hindered by that. But there's a lot of engineering and analysis that you do before a test, and then you execute the test, and then there's post-analysis. The test sequence and cadence that we have in our test plan that's will be signed and has been assigned in the past by me and Dr. Gilmore has this very detailed mapping to what requirements do we need to test and when. And we'll test against an ICBM this year. We'll actually salvo test against an ICBM next year. And then we'll start testing the no-kill vehicle in a controlled flight and then an intercept flight the following year. So given the development that's going on And specifically with RKV, we are absolutely at the right cadence for that testing between now and 2020.
Okay. You agree with that, General Mann?
Yes, yes, Senator. We work very, very closely with MDA, and in fact, you know, the master test plan is coordinated with all the services to make sure that we're in agreement. We feel that the test cadence right now is appropriate. And also, I'd like to commend MDA for the fact that we're really looking at opportunities where we can test out multiple platforms, whether it's Aegis or THAAD or Patriot. So there's a lot of very, very close coordination that goes on between the services as well as with MDA.
Thank you. Admiral Searing, you know, I've often talked about my state being the cornerstone of America's missile defense, and I know you were recently up in Alaska, and I apologize for not having the opportunity to accompany you, but I'm wondering if you could provide any insights or observations from your time at Clear and Fort Greely and some other locations. I'd love to, in another setting, get a download from you on your trip. But any that you care to offer the committee and
Yes, sir.
educate all of us on Alaska, it'd be welcome right now.
Yes, sir. We went to all three. We went to three areas. We went to Kodiak, we went to Clear, and we went to Fort Greely. And I talked to the community about the radar that's coming to Clear, which will be fielded by 2020, took their questions, very supportive of what we're doing. But more importantly for me and the military and Admiral Gortney is the strategic importance of that radar in the middle of the state and what it will provide him in the future for this discrimination capability that is absolutely required to stay ahead and keep our advantage against the threat that we see coming. And the strategic location of Alaska is why we're there, and very important. I think General Mann talked about Fort Greely. I'm a material developer, support part of that with Admiral Gortney and General Mann. Great work going on there. And then finally, down at Kodiak, we visited the range facility down there for future test opportunities that we might see coming. And is there a way to more affordably test in the future there, for example?
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Very briefly, Admiral Searing, for Senator Sullivan's benefit perhaps, but why is geographically Alaska a special place for missile defense?
Sir, I'll try to keep it unclassified if I can, and I'll get kicked under the table. But the trajectories that we're concerned about make it an ideal spot for the threats to the Alaska and to the United States and to Hawaii.
Thank you. Senator King.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Admiral Searing, and perhaps for the Secretary as well, would we be adding capabilities that would be significant by deploying THAAD in South Korea and or Aegis? And, Mr. Secretary, the policy implications is how would China react to such?
Senator King, as I think you probably know, we've announced that we've opened consultations with our Korean partners about deploying THAAD to the peninsula. We'll engage in discussions about a possible site before we reach an announcement. The purpose of the THAAD battery would be to protect our deployed forces in Korea and our partners in Korea. It's not about China. It's not a threat to China. And we've made that plain to them and offered to explain it to them.
Have we had any reaction from China?
They're not happy about it. But we've tried to reinforce the point that this is not about them, it is about our deployed forces.
I wanted to go back. We've talked about directed energy. I'm really disappointed that that seems to be falling off the budget table when, to me, it's penny wise and pound foolish. Directed energy would be a lot cheaper if it works than sending a rocket up every time. Is that, you're nodding, the record
That's
will
not
reflect.
for the record, sir, and we have been trying to get the directed energy program ramped up in past budget requests, and I just asked for the support this year.
Well, you'll certainly have it from myself and I think others, because that's the next technological development, and it would be a lot less expensive and perhaps even more effective. What about sensors? When we've had these meetings before, that's been a high priority. Is that on track? Are we Do we have sufficient sensor technology, and is it placed in the right place, and is that something that needs to be upgraded? Go ahead.
The first step in that discussion was what we did in Alaska, Senator, in terms of your support for that and that radar and its strategic importance for the threat from North Korea and a much more complex threat than they even have today that we're planning for. There are other gaps in the sensor architecture that we're looking at, and the department's looked at many different alternatives for both radar sensor locations and space sensor options. It's both radars and space that will be required for the future.
I can't help but notice, and the reason I was late to this hearing, we had a Sea Power Subcommittee going on in the next room where I'm sure if Senator Wicker were here, he would also want to point out that the Aegis is one of the key elements of this whole system, which happen to be, we're very proud, are built in Maine and in Mississippi. Do you see more deployment of the Aegis ashore capability, or where does that stand? We're sort of testing it in several places. Is that right, Mr. Secretary?
Senator, we have just completed the site for Aegis Ashore in Devasulu, Romania, and that will be operational later this year, and we're going to break ground in Poland and finish that by the end of 2018. We don't have any other plans or requirements for Aegis Ashore at the moment, nor have we had any requests for it from foreign partners.
But it's a nice capability.
It's a nice capability, and it's advancing. We will put a more advanced missile in the site in Poland that is still under development and co-development with our partners in the government of Japan.
You mentioned government of Japan and Poland. How are our allies contributing to this process, much of which is designed to defend them? Are we getting cooperation and money from our allies on these systems?
Well, in Japan, they're investing quite a bit on the co-development of the the Standard Missile 3-2A, and they've got their own Aegis-capable ships, and we've put a couple of radars there, the TPY-2 radars. In Europe, Romania and Poland are obviously offering and contributing the sites. Turkey is hosting a TPY-2 radar. The Spanish government is hosting our Aegis BMD ships in Rota. And then other governments are contributing in different ways. The French have their own system. Other NATO partners have Patriots and have deployed them in Turkey. So I can't say that all 28 NATO partners are contributing to NATO missile defense, but many of them are.
Admiral Searing, I couldn't hear the full exchange with Senator Heinrich. Is the Iron Dome completely built here, or is it partially? What is the deal with Israel on Iron Dome and David Sling?
The co-production agreement had 35% work share for the United States in FY14 and 55% in 15.
Okay, so it's a growing share of the work is to be done here.
That's correct, sir.
And that system has been effective, has it not?
Very effective. I won't go to the percentage, but very effective.
Yeah, I had a son in Israel during the war 2 summers ago, and I appreciate the effectiveness. He was in Ashkelon, right adjacent to where those rockets were coming from, and I know from his observation that it was an effective system. I congratulate you and thank you for that.
As will David Sling and Arrow as well, the follow-on systems after Iron Dome. So far, their testing has been extremely successful.
And is it fair to say that we are gaining important insights and experience from that relationship on those weapon systems?
Yes, sir, absolutely. On not just the weapon interceptor itself, but we've learned a lot on what they're doing with targets as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator King. On the Israel question, what was the president's request this year? What did we do last year? How many million? What was the president's request this year? And the president's request this year?
Sir, I'll talk about numbers, I think, from the top of my head. So I asked for, if I'm not right, I'll correct it for the record. But last year, it was roughly $150 million we requested. What was appropriated and enacted was $488 million. This year, we requested just under $150 million, and there's requests on the Hill that total almost $600 million.
Well, that's quite a contribution to the effort, and so I hope we are working together to gain benefit from that. I know we are some, and with regard to the question of Secretary McKeon, I think it was a good question about contributions of Japan. They've got a big economy. European economy is bigger than ours, and their population is bigger than ours. And Rota, Spain, they host our ships, but it's quite an advantage to them economically. I'd like to have that port in Alabama. Be good for our economy. There's no doubt about it. There's a growing feeling that our allies need to contribute more to the mutual defense of what used to be called, I guess, the free world. How do you think about that?
Senator, in a broad sense, we certainly agree with you. Our NATO partners have made new commitments to increase their defense spending at the Wales Summit in 2014 and set targets on both percentage of GDP that they're supposed to try to hit and in investments in R&D, and many of them are lagging. That's a fact. I'm not going to try to sugarcoat it. There's only a handful that have reached the 2% of GDP target. The important thing is the trend lines are going in the right direction in terms of NATO spending by countries, although the financial stress is hitting many of them because different countries, particularly in Southern Europe, have been undergoing significant economic disruption like Greece and Italy. I should have also said in response to Senator King's question, there are a lot of countries in the Middle East that are investing in missile defense, the Saudis, the Emiratis, the Kuwaitis, and so they are doing their share in contributing to the regional missile defense. And we're working to try to encourage both them acquiring systems but also cooperating together. And that'll be the topic of a meeting next week in the Middle East. The President's convening a second round of what he called the Camp David Summit last year. And Secretary Carter will have a meeting with his counterparts the day before, and missile defense will be one of the issues on the docket.
Well, just to summarize that, we've heard this song before. When I've asked questions for the last decade, and others have, they say the Europeans are getting better and they're going to do better, but basically the trend line's been negative. Germany's at 1.1%, I think, of GDP. They have the strongest economy in Europe. So it's a very problematic thing, and it goes beyond even money. It goes beyond how do you have a right to demand that we defend Europe when Russia's not on our border, and you want us to pay 2-3 times as much as you do. So anyway, we've discussed that with the NATO leader last week, and I thought it was a healthy discussion and exchange. But it's not a little matter, and it's not going to go away anytime soon. Let me ask you, maybe Admiral Searing, any others that would like to comment. The President's budget includes money to build a long-range discrimination radar in Alaska. The Missile Defense Agency analyst also concludes that, quote, additional missile defense sensor discrimination capabilities are needed to enhance the protection of the United States homeland against potential long-range ballistic missiles from Iran, close quote. And Congress in 2016 directed deployment by December 31st, 2020 of a long-range discrimination radar or other appropriate sensor to support the defense of the homeland against Iran. So it's in a mandate. And while the MDA is examining locations best suited for future deployment of this advanced discrimination radar, there is no funding in the whole 5-year spending plan budgeted for such a development and deployment, nor has Congress received a plan from MDA to meet the deployment deadline as directed in Section 1684 of the Act. The administration opposed an East Coast ground-based interceptor site, and we had a big discussion about that and acquiesced into that determination. I think it was your recommendation. We didn't need another site, but we did, I think, agree that we needed an increased discrimination on the east. If we need it for Alaska, don't we need it for the East Coast? So how would you respond to that?
I'll respond to that. we are obviously very well aware of language that came in the NDA last year, and we've started the work on siting and looking at the options in terms of where SBX, for example, can be home ported. And then the follow-on analysis is where the sites that on the East Coast that could help, and in terms of sensor capability. So that work is going on in parallel with the department's work that's gone on the sensor AOA worldwide. And I can tell you that this point of what are we going to do with an Atlantic radar is part of that discussion. And it's true today that there's no money in the 17 budget, but I think you'll see the department come through this question before 18 comes over on what are we going to do to meet the intent of the language, to include a discussion, sir, and I'll let Admiral Gortney jump in here on what is his ability to surge SBX if the Iranian threat did escalate.
Well, it's problematic that there's no money in the whole 5-year plan. Admiral Gortney?
Yes, sir, we have the ability to move SBX should we need it, but the higher priority right now.
Now, the move SBX, this is not the Alaska
No, sir.
That's going to be a new system. This would be the one that was in Hawaii?
This is what's on a very large oil platform that was built in Texas, and we moved on a heavy lift ship to Hawaii. And should we need, if the threat demanded that we needed a site before the study is completed, and we put a site in, would be able to move SBX to the other coast. But right now, the priority is to keep it where it is, focused on North Korea today.
Senator King, you wanted to follow up?
We've learned in hearings over the past year of a growing anti-satellite capability. And I guess the question I wanted to ask is, to what extent do all these systems rely upon satellites? Because in a war or a hostility situation, one of the first things that's going to happen is there's going to be a diminution of our satellite capability. So I guess you understand the question is, if satellite capability is compromised, does that compromise the underlying effectiveness of these various systems, or are there alternatives? Admiral Gortney, you want to take a crack at that?
Sir, I'm afraid to do it in this forum. I need to come to you in a classified forum and talk to that.
That's fine.
Thank you. Senator King, the one thing I'd say about that is, as you may recall, in last year's budget, we significantly increased our investment in protection of our satellites and other investments in the space domain. And we're very focused, the Secretary and the Deputy, in a big way about these investments, and we've sustained them in FY17. And so we're well aware of the issues that you're raising and making the right investments for.
I'm aware of those, what you're talking about. I just want to be sure, for want of a nail, the shoe was lost. For want of a shoe, the horse was lost. You know where that ends. So we'll discuss that in another setting. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Senator King. I think that's critical. I believe we got Senator Donnelly and Sullivan, and we'll just not go on a full round. Just ask questions as you feel
Two real quick
appropriate.
questions. Admiral Searing, are you comfortable with the level of risk MDA? Admiral Searing, are you comfortable with the level of risk MDA is balancing in order to meet deadlines set in law for programs like MOKV, or an additional sensor to deploy off of the East Coast?
Sir, on MOKV, we're putting those gates together in terms of where do we think the knowledge points are over the next year to prove where we need to be for a full program. I don't have a full program requested for MOKV yet. But until I work through that and see where the companies are at level of maturity over the next 12 to 18 months, that'll help me get my mind around when are we ready and what's the schedule for it.
Okay, and then lastly, Admiral Gortney, when I talked to the Chinese, they talked about how little influence they have over North Korea, that it seems to be getting less in their mind. And I'm wondering how much of that is fluff and how much of that is real. And I was wondering if you could fill us in a little bit.
I think it's safe to say that the influence that China used to have, they no longer have with the current leader. I think that's at this level, I'd like to leave it at that.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Sullivan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just two quick follow-up questions. One is kind of a broader one, really education for the committee and those watching. You know, we talk a lot in acronyms and technology. Admiral Searing or Admiral Gortney, can you describe particularly given the North Korean evolving threat and even the ICBM pursuit by the Iranians, why the LRDR makes sense and why that is so important strategically for the country, what that is doing, and really kind of a follow-up to the chairman's question on that issue. That's one, and then I'll ask a final one after that.
And it's absolutely critical, and it's why Admiral Searing's investments in sensors is so important. One of the ways we're going to achieve getting on the correct side of the cost curve is to drive our effectiveness up. So with better sensor discrimination, I may have the ability to shoot fewer missiles. Or as the threat evolves, I'll have a better idea to discriminate what the threat is doing, what the maneuvering warhead is doing, to then drive the probability of kill of our existing warheads. So you can't kill what you can't see, and we need to see better.
So it drives up our ability to kill any incoming missile?
Both simple and complex.
Okay. Let me just, looking at the budget requests, from what I can see, there seems to be about a $74 million shortfall in the BMD mid-course defense account, where last year the President's budget was expected and where PB-17 is today. Am I reading that correctly? And if so, what accounts for that shortfall?
The request was down slightly from last year, from what we were expecting in 17. Part of that was driven by part of the share of the $300 million cut that flowed down. It took part of that in that line. Also, I would say, sir, there was refined estimates from the companies on what it would take to do what they're going to do. And, obviously, we don't do 100% of everything that is offered. This is a matter of what do we need to do the mission-critical work that's important for the program.
So that budget shortfall is not something that you or we as the Oversight Committee should be concerned about?
No, sir. We and you have adequately funded with the GMD program with a big non-recurring spike last year, and all of those efforts are ongoing this year.
Okay.
I'm comfortable with where we are.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Secretary, well, this is MDA and Admiral Searing too. So the first chart again shows a 14% overall decline in funding for MDA. And if you'll put back the second chart there, this chart reflects an additional troubling trend in that in 2008, 99% of the budget went to R&D, whereas in 2016, that number had dropped in 2015. It went up a little in 16 and begins to drop again in the 5-year submission we got this year, having it dropped down to 19 to a little over $5 billion there, which is a little more than half. So you drop about 45% of your R&D spending. Tell us what's happening. First of all, MDA originally, Admiral Searing, was not designed to be a procurement agency. It was designed to produce the technology that would be paid for by the services who would use it. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And so now you're purchasing some of it. What I had not ascertained fully was a lot of that's coming out of your R&D budget. So that's a pretty troubling thing. What does that put us on track for the next several years, the next 5 years, maybe?
Let me, Mr. Chairman, I was just thinking the answer. Let me just provide, I think, some context, because I've studied the exact problem in terms of we're absolutely spending more on procurement than R&D, and there's certainly much less than there used to be. But what I've done for historical context is gone back and looked at the 2005, 2010 timeframe when everything in MDA was R&D, including the fielding of the entire ground-based mid-course defense system. And what we have done with that and Aegis in particular is done the R&D and now shifted those to procurement. So that's why you see
So
it.
now you would say that you probably incorrectly included the deployment of the system in Alaska as R&D when it really was procurement?
Sir, I wasn't here. I wouldn't
I know, was I- I mean, is that-
characterize as, it was, we had a mandate and had the charter to deliver capability as soon as possible from the president to get this in the ground at light speed. And it was
Well, I
done.
remember that.
it
The
was
deal
done-
was, Senator Sullivan, it was, the deal was that North Korea proposed a threat, and we decided to accelerate the process to actually get these things in the ground. We believed they would work, and we would prove it as time went by, and I think it would have worked had we had to use it at that time, and I think it's probably more effective today than then.
Sure.
But anyway, so how do you explain this now?
So there was also a big airborne laser program in that R&D as well that never fielded. It did its mission. It proved that we could shoot down a ballistic missile with a laser. But that didn't become a program, so that was R&D. So there's some big drivers here in terms of where that R&D went prior to when you start seeing the blue. What you see here is you see us finishing the design, finishing the testing of the SM-3, and now procuring it quickly, because there's a regional combatant commander requirement that they need ships, they need missiles, they need batteries, they need missiles for THAAD, and that's what's happened. And certainly the programs that I spoke about are going to be negotiated with the services on when do I transfer, which is the question is, when do I transfer these programs to the services similar to what I did with Patriot? That's the question.
Senator, I would like to add that, speaking for the Army, we are in consultation with MDA on the transfer of some of these different programs to make sure that MDA is able to get after exactly the emphasis that you alluded to. So we're working closely with MDA on how we can transfer some of this, when appropriate, to the Army.
Briefly, before I go to Senator Sullivan, what programs are on track to be transferred from MDA to the Army or other services?
Right off the top, THAAD is one of the programs that we're looking at, and also the...
That is included in the MDA budget now?
That's correct.
Yes, sir. As well as the TPY-2, those sensors that we have globally, we're looking at, right now some of those are manned by contractors, and as we put in place the life support capabilities, we'll transfer that to soldier run, and that will also be assumed by the Army.
Senator Sullivan.
Let me just ask one more follow-up question related to the chairman's question in that chart. Very simple, which is, should our missile defense budgets be flat or really going down when there's no doubt that the threat is going up? And I'll pose that to all four of you. Seems to me we have no doubt the threat's increasing. And yet, and I appreciate what the administration was focused on with kind of a rapid deployment, but right there, you're looking at either a declining budget or at least, at best, a flat budget, which doesn't seem to make sense. Admiral Gortney, your testimony, which I really appreciate, you were talking about staying in front of the curve, but I'm not sure that's staying in front of the curve when we know the threat side is going like this.
Could I just follow up with that? Fiscal year 2017 MDA budget request is $300 million below what the President anticipated last year in the 2016 five-year budget. So this is about $300 million, Secretary McKeon, less, I believe, than what we anticipated last year would be the President's request. Admiral Gortney, I'll let you answer that question.
Well, I'm out of my lane a little here since I'm lucky enough to only own the trigger. But I think what you're seeing up there is reluctance of investing dollars against a capability using the current technology that we're using. That even though we're investing in it, and we're investing dollars, capability, platforms, burning up op tempo, purse tempo of the low density, high demand, it's not able to outpace the threat.
But if that were the case, wouldn't we still want to increase budget and maybe have it heavier weighted towards R&D? Right there, that's just all.
I'm in vehement agreement with you, sir. But I'm just trying to explain why I think we're seeing what we're seeing. Because on our current process, our current strategy, the current technology, lacking the R&D investments that MDA is making to see if we can get on the correct side of the cost curve, reliability, better sensors, multi-object kill vehicle, an airborne laser that really works, would make those dollars more effective. I'm just seeing, I think, reluctance to fund a program correctly, given the technology that we're using. And I'm not sure if I'm articulating it clearly.
Senator,
Go ahead.
yeah, if I could just add to this, in addition to new technologies and R&D investments and whatnot, we're also, I think it's important that we note that we're also looking at current capabilities and what we do to maximize the current fleet that we have on the team, whether it's Patriot, there's Patriot modernization plans. So it's more than just LEAP technologies. Yes, we're focused on that, but we're also trying to make sure that we're looking at the current capabilities and how can we make them even more effective. And we talked about the sensors, the sensor upgrades, the discrimination side of the equation. So I think it's important that we recognize the fact that it's more than just new R&D programs. It's also how can we be more effective with what we have already.
Ms. Secretary Admiral, any final thoughts on a declining or flat budget and a clear increasing threat?
I'd say a few things, Senator Sullivan. First, stepping back and looking at the overall DoD budget over the last 6 to 8 years, there's been a decline due to the change in the fiscal environment and the limits of the Budget Control Act. I don't know the number off the top of my head, but I think the last budget Secretary Gates submitted, around 11 or 12, projected an over $600 billion budget for the Pentagon in fiscal 16, and our base budget last year was $520 billion.
Now look, but I think there's no doubt that the Congress and the BCA were part of the issue, but I think, I don't think that's what's driving that chart right there.
Well, sir, in terms of the overall top line, I think across the department, every program has suffered a little bit because of the BCA limits, and we're still staring at them out in the out years of our current fight. You all have given us a couple of years of relief under last year's agreement, but in 18 to 21, we've got $100 billion in our program that is $100 billion above the BCA limits. So we're very worried about that in a broad sense.
Some of us are as well, too.
Yes, no, I appreciate that. Secondly, I would say we're not only thinking about terminal defense of our ground-based mid-course systems, or THAAD, as we've talked about, we're looking at new technologies and other capabilities militarily in addition to missile defense to deal with the threat of missiles from either North Korea or Iran, and some of that we'd have to talk to you in a different venue about. And then the last thing on the procurement I would talk about a little bit is MDA has different procurement authorities to buy things faster than the services. Now, you could obviously give the services acquisition authority for missile defense that would speed things up if we were to shift procurement to the services, but I think part of the reason you see a lot of that procurement that MDA has done is because they've got this faster acquisition authority that was a demand signal from both the President and the Congress.
Senator, I just reiterate that this is today, and we're into some very important concept studies right now with directed energy in particular, and the importance of that demonstrator to get going to inform a much wider, more expansive R&D program. That's one example. MOKV, the multiple object kill vehicle, is very important for us to get through the next 12 months on feasibility from the contractors, and then the R&D request will go up. There are things here on the technology side that you will see come. The last one would be a space-based system of some sort to help us with tracking and discrimination worldwide. There are R&D programs that are not shown here yet that we will, through the department, work and come forward with as they compete with everything else in the department. But this is not the end. I do see the R&D requests for the future of MDA ramping up. Once I'm to the point of proposing mature concepts that I know will deliver on time and within the budget that we have. And sir, I think it's a shift for us in terms of, Mr. Chairman, you made the point of deliver capability very fast with with what we were given back in the 2000, 2005 timeframe, and we did that. And they put interceptors into the ground. Today, I do not, and I endorse entirely the threat on where it's going. But at the same time, we, as the program executors, must be very careful about just throwing money at the problem, and must be very deliberate on maturity of the technology and the progression of the system engineering and the architecture and the component testing and analysis that supports a program before I bring it forward and ask for billions of dollars. That's where we're at. And it's not decades away, sir. It's in this fit-up that we'll be to the point to make the case to the department and make the case over here on the next technology in many of the areas that we talked about.
All right. Well, thank you. One more question on the laser, airborne laser system. Will you have sufficient money this year to do what you'd like to do with regard to advancing that program?
Sir, the request that we have on the low-power laser demonstrator, if supported, will get us started down that path to doing a competition for that platform in 2017. And then some partner will win, 2 partners will win, we'll down select to 1 eventually, and we'll get to a flight in 2020 with a final demonstration in 21.
All right. Thank you very much. It's been an excellent afternoon, and we value your insight and professionalism. We are adjourned.